The waitress mistook him for a janitor. The mafia boss didn't deny it until... The clock above the pie case read 2:17 a.m. outside the Ravenlight diner. Ashbourne was drowning. Rain hammered the pavement of the Wharf District, turning the neon sign's reflection into a bleeding watercolor of red and blue. Lila Carver, was just trying to close out the register. It was the worst part of the shift, counting out sticky ones and fives while my feet ached, smelling of stale coffee and fried onions. We had a new guy. He'd shown up an hour ago, claiming to be the replacement from Night Clean Services. He wore a flimsy nylon jacket that looked 2 sizes too big and a generic blue baseball cap pulled low, shadowing his face. He hadn't said more than 3 words, just grabbed a bin and started clearing tables, moving with a strange, quiet efficiency. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. Just another shadow in a diner full of them, a man doing a job no one else wanted at 2 a.m. I was totaling the receipts when the bell above the door jangled, a harsh, unwelcome sound against the rhythm of the storm. 3 men stomped in, shaking water from coats that smelled like bilge and dead fish. These were not customers. These were the Sable Dockworkers Union, which was just a polite name for the thugs who ran the wharf. Their leader, a brute named Marco, grinned, showing a gold tooth. "Lila, sweetheart, register's looking a little heavy tonight," he sneered, leaning on the counter. My stomach turned to ice. "We're closed. Marco, you know the rules." "We make the rules." He snapped his fingers. The other 2, younger and meaner, fanned out. One of them kicked the leg of a stool, sending it crashing. The other grabbed the bun coffee maker and shoved it clear off the counter. Glass shattered, scalding brown liquid hissing across the linoleum. "Hey," I yelled, my voice thinner than I wanted. "Where's Henderson?" Marco demanded, walking behind the counter. I glanced toward the back. My manager, Mr. Henderson, a man composed entirely of weak excuses and cheap ties, had vanished. I heard the distinct click of the stockroom deadbolt sliding home. Coward. I was alone. "He's not here," I lied, backing away. "Shame. The union fee's gone up. Inflation, you know." Marco grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. "We need 500. Now." "I don't have that kind of money." "Then I guess we'll just have to break things until you find it." He raised his fist, aiming for the pie case. "Gentlemen." The voice was low, calm, and completely out of place. It came from the shadows by the jukebox. The new janitor? He was holding his mop, not like a tool, but like a staff. The brim of his cap still hid his eyes. Marco laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "What'd you say? Sweepy, you lost." "We're closed," the janitor said again. His voice was perfectly level, carrying easily over the rain. "Please leave." Or, "What, you gonna scrub us to death?" The smallest of the 3 thugs, energized by Marco's confidence, pulled a switchblade. The blade snapped open with a hungry click. He lunged at the janitor. I screamed, or I tried to. It caught in my throat. What happened next didn't make sense. The janitor didn't dodge. He moved inward. He rotated the mop handle. The heavy wooden shaft catching the thug's wrist, there was a sound like a dry branch snapping. The knife clattered to the floor. The thug howled, clutching his arm. Before the other 2 could react, the janitor swept the mop head, slick with dirty water, across the floor in a low arc. The second man slipped, pinwheeling his arms before crashing hard onto his back. Marco, stunned, reached inside his coat. The janitor was already moving. He jabbed the mop handle forward, a short, brutal thrust that struck Marco square in the sternum. All the air exploded from the union boss's lungs in a pained grunt. The janitor reversed his grip, stepped past the man on the floor, and used the handle as a crossbar against Marco's chest. He simply walked forward, pushing all 3 of them, one clutching his broken wrist. One winded, one slipping and trying to stand backward toward the entrance. His movements were fluid, economical, and terrifyingly precise. He shoved them through the door and into the street. They stumbled, falling into the deluge. The janitor stood in the doorway for a second, the mop resting on his shoulder. "Don't come back," he said. "Marco." gasping in the gutter, stared at him, but the usual bravado was gone. It was replaced by something else: recognition and fear. He scrambled to his feet and herded his men away, disappearing into the storm without a single look back. The janitor pulled the door shut, the bell tinkling softly. He turned, the low light catching his face for the first time as he adjusted his cap. He was younger than I thought, maybe early 30s, with a strong jaw and eyes that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. My heart was jackhammering against my ribs. My God, are you okay? I thought they were going to kill you. I rushed behind the counter, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grab a fresh mug. They broke the coffee pot. His voice was flat. I'll make a new pot. Here. I grabbed the small emergency pot from under the counter and fumbled with the filter. That's on the house. Forever. Thank you. I'm Lila, by the way. He watched me, his gaze analytical, as if he were cataloging the mess. Ronan. He didn't offer a last name, and he just took the mug of black coffee I poured, his fingers brushing mine. They were calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. He went back to the corner and started picking up the trash from the bin the thugs had overturned, as if he hadn't just dismantled 3 grown men. My adrenaline-soaked brain tried to categorize him. He fought like a soldier. He must be an ex-military guy, down on his luck, working a dead-end job. It was the only thing that made sense. 10 minutes later, the blue and whites of the Ashbourne Public Order Unit rolled up. 2 officers, Riley and Dane, came in, shaking rain from their hats. They hated the late shift as much as I did. Lila, heard you had some excitement, Riley said, his eyes scanning the diner, lingering on the broken glass. The Sable crew came in. They wanted money. They broke the pot, knocked over a stool. They hurt you? Dane asked, his hand on his notepad. No. He stopped them. I nodded toward the back, where Ronan was quietly wiping down the booth Marco had leaned on. Riley and Dane both looked at him, and a weird thing happened. They didn't see a janitor. They froze. I saw Riley's hand twitch toward his sidearm, just for a second, before he forced it to relax. They exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. It was the same look Marco had. Recognition. You, Riley said, his voice suddenly formal. You're the new janitor. Ronan just nodded, not looking up from his rag. Right. Well. Riley cleared his throat. Looks like they left without major incident. Just sweep up the glass. Lila, try to keep the door locked. They asked a few more pointless questions, their eyes constantly drifting back to Ronan, who ignored them completely. They seemed eager to leave. As they walked out, I heard Riley mutter to Dane, "What the hell is he doing here?" I cleaned up the shattered pot, my mind racing. When I went to clear the counter where Ronan had been sitting, I found his empty mug, and underneath it, a coin. It wasn't a quarter. It was heavy, silver and old. It felt warm. In the center, a symbol was expertly engraved, a stylized V, sharp and elegant, that looked almost like a wasp or a dagger, the Vesper mark. I'd seen it spray-painted on containers down at the deep docks, the ones nobody was supposed to go near. It was a ghost story, a rumor whispered by truckers and fishermen. I slipped the coin into my apron pocket, the metal heavy against my leg. Ronan finished his work, but he didn't leave. I watched him go to the back hallway, where the ballast for the fluorescent lights had been buzzing and flickering for a week. Henderson kept forgetting to call maintenance. Ronan dragged a stool over, produced a screwdriver from his jacket pocket, and in less than 5 minutes, the annoying buzz was gone. The light was steady. He then came to the front. You ready to lock up, Lila? Yeah, just gotta pull the grate. He beat me to it, grabbing the heavy metal handle. As he pulled the rattling security door down, his cheap jacket sleeve rode up his forearm for a second under the newly fixed light. I saw a scar. It was pale and old, a thick, raised line of tissue shaped exactly like an anchor hook. I caught his scent then. It wasn't just rain-soaked nylon. It was something clean and sharp, like salt water and cold iron. He secured the lock. Good night. He pushed the main door open and stepped out onto the wet sidewalk. He didn't look for a bus. He just started walking toward the docks. I watched through the glass, my hand on the deadbolt, a black sedan, a heavy domestic model with tinted windows, slid out of the alley across the street. It hadn't been there a minute ago. It glided to a stop about 20 feet behind him, its engine a low rumble. It was following him. Ronan didn't turn. He didn't break stride. He just lifted his left hand slightly, palm facing backward, and made a small, two-fingered gesture toward the car's rearview mirror. The car's headlights flashed once. Then it settled in, keeping its distance as he walked away. I locked the door, my forehead resting against the cool glass. He's just a kind janitor, I told myself, a vet who knows how to handle himself. But I knew I was lying. The way those sable thugs looked at him, the way the POU cops tensed, the Vesper coin now warming my pocket, the silent, waiting car. The rain finally stopped. The neon sign outside sputtered click. Buzz, click, painting the diner red, then blue, then black. I pulled the silver coin out. The Vesper symbol seemed to glow in the flashing light, mocking me, a question I was terrified to answer. The man who just saved my diner wasn't just mopping floors. He was something else entirely. The high from the previous night's adrenaline dump vanished the second my boots hit the gravel of my father's tow yard. It was 9 a.m. I'd gotten maybe 4 hours of sleep, and the yard, Carver and Son Towing, was too quiet. Two men in crisp gray uniforms I'd never seen before were standing by Dad's office, a clipboard in hand. A third was affixing a bright orange sticker to the hydraulic lift on Big Red, our best heavy-duty wrecker. Lila, thank God, my father, Gideon Carver, said. His voice was rough, sandpaper on wood. He looked smaller than he had a year ago, diminished by the chemotherapy that had saved his life but mortgaged our future. They're from the Harbor Compliance Office. I'd lived in Ashbourne my whole life. I knew the Port Authority, the POU, even the Coast Guard. I'd never heard of these guys. Safety inspection, the man with the clipboard said, not even looking at me. He had a thin mustache and eyes that didn't blink. We're finding multiple infractions. This vehicle's lift certification is expired by 2 days. That one, he pointed to our flatbed, has a tire tread depth 1 millimeter under code. 1 millimeter, I shot back? That's insane. We check those weekly. It's a violation. He tore a sheet from his pad and handed it to my dad. That's a $500 fine. And this one is $1,000. And the certification lapse requires a full mechanical teardown and recertification. The vehicle is impounded on site. He moved to the next truck and the next. With every step, he slapped another sticker. Tore off another fine. They weren't just fining us, they were paralyzing us. Without the trucks, we had no business. With no business, we couldn't pay the medical debt. If we couldn't pay that, we'd lose the yard. If we lost the yard, we lost the house that sat on the same parcel of land. It was a systematic execution, done with a clipboard and a roll of stickers. Please, Gideon said, his voice cracking. It was the sound that broke me. My father was a proud man, a man who had pulled half this city out of ditches for 30 years. We're already behind. My wife's, my medical bills. I can fix these things. Just give me a warning. The Harbor Compliance Office does not issue warnings. The man said, payment is due in 48 hours, or the impound becomes permanent seizure. They were gone in 10 minutes, leaving behind a blizzard of neon orange stickers and $6,000 in phantom fines. My dad sank onto an old tire, his head in his hands. They're choking us, Lila, he whispered. They're just choking us out. I couldn't stay. I couldn't let him see the cold, hard fury in my eyes. I had to pay for this. I picked up an extra shift. Not at the Raven Light, but slinging beers and greasy fish baskets at the Rusted Anchor, a rough bar down on Grendel Pier. The money was faster, the tips thicker, and the talk louder. While I poured a draft for a longshoreman, I listened. The whole pier was buzzing about Mayor Alder Quinn's new port expansion project. He was promising thousands of jobs, a new era of prosperity for Ashbourne, funded by a massive private investment. It's the Vesper Syndicate, Plain and simple. An old docker muttered into his beer. Quinn's just the smiling face they bought. They're clearing out the whole wharf. One way or another. My blood ran cold. One way or another. Stickers and clipboards choking us out. They were clearing the board. And my family's yard was in their way. That night, the shift at the Raven Light felt different. Every jangle of the bell made me jump. I was exhausted, edgy, and terrified. I kept thinking about the silver Vesper coin sitting in my jeans pocket, heavy as a stone. At 1 a.m., exactly as the rain started to fall, he came in. Ronan, still in the cheap jacket, still with the blue cap pulled low. He nodded at me, a bare incline of his head, and grabbed the mop. He was, for all intents and purposes, just the janitor. But I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. I couldn't unsee the effortless, brutal way he'd moved. I couldn't unhear the way the cops had tensed up. He worked in silence for an hour, cleaning the floors, wiping the steel, refilling the napkin dispensers. He moved with that same unsettling grace, making no noise. Finally, he approached the stockroom door, which doubled as our break room. "The vacuum," he said, his voice that same low rumble. "The filter's clogged. I need to clear the line." "It's in there," I said, gesturing. He slipped inside, closing the door most of the way, but not all. It was the first time we were truly alone. I found myself standing on the other side of that door, polishing silverware that was already clean. I could hear him tinkering. The quiet click of a latch, the whir of a small motor. "They came to my dad's yard this morning," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. My voice was quiet. "Just for him, not the Sable crew. Men in uniforms. From a harbor compliance office that doesn't exist. They've shut him down. 6,000 in fines." Silence from the stockroom, just the sound of my own breathing. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. Shame and fear burning in my throat. He's already so far under from my mom's medical bills. They're going to take our house. They're going to take everything, and they're doing it with paperwork. I heard him stop moving. For a full minute, there was nothing. I was about to walk away, embarrassed, when his voice came through the crack in the door. "Have you ever swum at Halcyon Point at night, Lila?" The question was so strange, so completely out of left field that it knocked the breath out of me. "What, no? The current's deadly. It's all rocks and undertow." "But have you ever been tempted," he asked, "to just dive into the dark to see if you're strong enough to make it back?" I didn't know what to say. It wasn't a question. It was a measurement. He was asking me if I was brave. Before I could answer, the bell on the diner's front door tinkled. I jumped, startled, but the door was already closing. No one was there. The wind, maybe. Then I looked down. A plain manila envelope had been pushed under the door. It was sitting on the welcome mat, damp from the rain. I stared at it. Ronan emerged from the stockroom, the vacuum cleaner silent. He saw the envelope, then looked at me. He didn't move toward it. He just watched. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a single, grainy, black and white photograph. My stomach dropped. It was my father, Gideon, standing by his tow truck, talking to Marco and the other two Sable thugs from last night. It looked like a casual conversation, but in the context of this morning, it looked like conspiracy. At the bottom of the photo, a single line was typed, "Talk to us," or "The FBMI talks to you. Your choice." The FBMI, the Federal Bureau of Maritime Integrity, the same agency I'd heard about on the radio, the one investigating money laundering at the port. They were threatening to frame my father as a criminal associate of the men who were extorting us. I felt dizzy, the floor tilting under my feet. "They're trying to ruin him," I breathed, the photo shaking. I felt him move. Suddenly, Ronan was standing directly behind me. He wasn't touching me, not even a little, but I could feel the heat radiating from him. I could smell the salt water and cold iron. His presence was a solid wall at my back. "Don't react with fear," he whispered. His voice was so close, it vibrated against my ear. "That's what they want. They want you to panic. They want you to run to them. Don't..." His certainty, his absolute calm was an insult to my panic. I spun around, shoving the photo against his chest. "This is my family," I snapped, my voice low and fierce. "This isn't a game. This isn't you getting to play hero with a mop. Look at this. They're going to destroy my father. I don't know who you are, but you stay away from me. Stay away from my family." He looked down at the photo, his expression unreadable under the brim of his cap. Then he looked at me, and his eyes were cold as the water off Halcyon Point. He gave a single, sharp nod. "All right." He turned, picked up his coat, and grabbed a red metal toolbox from the janitorial cart. He walked to the door, paused, and set the toolbox on the floor just inside the entrance. "The vacuum's fixed," he said, and he was gone. I stared at the toolbox. It was old, heavy-duty steel, and looked absurdly heavy. I waited until I was sure he was gone, then locked the door and went to it. It was a standard bolt and driver set. I almost dismissed it. But he had left it for a reason. I opened the lid. Inside, nestled in a grease-stained foam cutout, were heavy-duty wrenches and sockets, real tools, but beneath the top tray, my fingers hit something plastic. I lifted the foam inlay. Taped to the metal bottom of the box was a white plastic card. It was an ID badge. It had a magnetic strip, a photo of a man I didn't recognize, and the words, "Iron Vale Warehousing." Under the name, a clearance level was printed in bold, black letters, technician. He wasn't staying away. He wasn't helping me. He was opening a door and giving me the choice to dive into the dark, all on my own. I got to the diner an hour before my shift, the Iron Vale technician's badge heavy in my jacket pocket, feeling like a block of ice against my ribs. I was going to use it. I had to. But the thought of walking into that warehouse, a place rumored to be the Vesper Syndicate's vault, made my hands shake. He was already there. The diner was supposed to be closed for another hour, but the door was unlocked. Ronan was inside, but he wasn't mopping. He was wiping down the chrome on the jukebox, the cheap nylon jacket gone, leaving him in a simple dark gray Henley that stretched across his shoulders. The usual graveyard silence of the Raven light was gone. A low, smoky saxophone was pouring from the speakers. It was old jazz, the kind my grandmother used to listen to, full of heartache and slow nights. He must have heard me, but he finished wiping a smear from the glass before turning. He looked less like a shadow and more like a man. "You're early," he observed. "So are you," I gestured to the jukebox. I did not know that thing even worked. The B-side selection was jammed. I fixed it. He looked at the machine, then at me. "They do not make music like this anymore." "It's nice," I said, fiddling with my apron strings. He stepped away from the jukebox, moving into the open space of the diner. He held out his hand. It was not a question. It was a simple, quiet offer. My heart did a stupid little flip. "What are you doing?" "This song is almost over," he said, as if that explained everything. I should have said no. I should have pointed to the badge in my pocket and demanded answers. I should have told him I had a shift to prep. Instead, I put my hand in his. His grip was what I remembered, calloused, firm, and impossibly warm. His other hand settled on the small of my back, a light, guiding pressure that sent a shiver straight up my spine. He pulled me gently onto the checkered linoleum, right between the counter and the vinyl booths. "I do not know how to dance to this," I whispered, my voice suddenly breathy. "You just follow," he rumbled. And I did. He led, and I followed. It was not a complicated dance, just a slow, swaying box step, but he moved with that same fluid economy he used for everything. His steps were sure, his lead confident. The world shrank to the small circle of his arms. I smelled the rain that was starting to fall outside, a fresh, clean scent on his clothes, mingled with the diner's faint aroma of coffee and sugar. I stumbled over a crack in the tile, and he held me steady, pulling me a fraction closer to correct my balance. My cheek brushed the soft cotton of his shirt, and I was suddenly, vividly aware of the solid wall of muscle in his chest, the steady, slow beat of his heart beneath my ear. It was the safest I had felt in months. It was the most dangerous place I had ever been. I caught myself almost leaning into him, almost resting my head on his shoulder. I stiffened, pulling back just enough to put a respectable inch of air between us. He did not fight it. He just held me there, in that new, tense space, his eyes on mine. "Where did a janitor learn to dance like that?" I asked, trying to break the spell. A small, very rare smile touched the corner of his mouth. "You pick things up on the docks. My mother always said you could measure a man by how he handles a dance and a debt. And you, I just like the music," he said. The smile widened. Just for a second, a genuine, unguarded flash of light. It changed his entire face, softening the hard lines. I found myself staring, trying to memorize it. The song ended, the sax fading into a soft crackle of static. The diner bell jangled, shattering the moment. We sprang apart like guilty teenagers. I felt a hot blush creep up my neck. Ronan was instantly the janitor again, his expression neutral, his hands dropping to his sides. The lunch rush, or what passed for one in the wharf district, trickled in, a few truckers, a couple of shipyard workers, and one woman who was entirely out of place. She wore a charcoal gray blazer, her dark hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. She sat at the counter, her posture perfect, and ordered a black coffee and a dry rye toast. She ate with small, precise bites, but her eyes were not on her food. Her gaze was fixed on Ronan, who was wiping down the pie case. She was not looking at him. She was scanning him, like a machine, her eyes sharp and analytical. It was an X-ray, and I had the sudden chilling feeling that she could see the Vesper coin, the Iron Veil badge, and every other secret hidden in this diner. "Slow day, Lila," she asked, her voice crisp, reading my name tag. "It is always slow before the storm," I said, refilling her coffee. Her eyes flicked back to Ronan as he moved past her to clear a table. "You have new help." "Just started." "Good help is hard to find," she said, taking a sip. As Ronan passed behind her, she spoke without turning, her voice carrying clearly. "Make sure you get the grout by the door. Sanitation guy, it is a health code violation." My stomach clenched, but Ronan did not react. He did not stiffen or pause or show any sign he had heard the insult. He just kept walking. "Yes, ma'am," he rumbled, dumping the plates in the bus tub. The woman in the blazer paid with a crisp $20 bill, left a generous $5 tip, and walked out. She moved with the same contained, efficient energy as Ronan. I picked up her mug, and underneath it was a business card. Mara Dax, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Maritime Integrity, FBMI, the agency from the threatening note, the one investigating the port. My blood ran cold. She was not just a customer. She was the law. And she had been here to send Ronan a message, and maybe one to me, too. I finished the lunch shift in a daze. I had a delivery to make for my dad. His yard was still locked down, but a friend's garage on Thorn Street needed a specific alternator we had in surplus. It was my one chance to make a little cash to keep the lights on. As I boxed it up, Ronan appeared at my elbow. "I will drive you." "I can take the bus." "It is raining," he stated, as if it were a final verdict, "and Thorn Street is not a good place to walk alone with a heavy box." He was right. I did not have the energy to argue. His car was the same black sedan from the other night, the one that had followed him. The inside was immaculate, sterile, and smelled faintly of leather. He turned the engine on, but not the radio. He just turned on the fan. The low whir of the air filled the silence, a heavy, tense sound. I could hear the squeak of the wipers and the hiss of the tires on the wet pavement. I was acutely aware of him sitting next to me, his hands resting lightly on the wheel. Thorn Street was a narrow canyon of crumbling brick and rusted fire escapes, deep in the territory the Sable crew claimed. "Wait here," I said, grabbing the box from the back seat. "It will only take a minute." "I will walk you to the door." "I am fine, Ronan." "No, you are not," he said, and got out of the car. The alley leading to the garage's side entrance was dark and smelled of stale beer. We were halfway down when 3 figures stepped out from a recessed doorway, blocking our path. They were young, wearing the Sable Crew's colors, but they had the hungry, stupid look of wannabes. "Well, look at this," one of them sneered, holding a tire iron. "Delivery girl. What is in the box?" "And she brought her boyfriend," another laughed, eyeing Ronan's plain clothes. "Give us the box and your purse," the leader said. "We will let him watch." I backed up, my heart hammering. Ronan stepped in front of me. He did not raise his hands. He just occupied the space. "Walk away," Ronan said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the rain. The one with the tire iron laughed and swung it in a low arc. Ronan moved. He did not dodge. He flowed. He stepped inside the swing, his left hand catching the man's wrist, his right hand striking the elbow. He twisted. It was a simple, fluid lock. The man screamed, a high, thin sound, and the tire iron clanged onto the pavement. A second man lunged, pulling a knife. Ronan did not even let go of the first. He pivoted, using the first man's body as a shield, and kicked the second man's knee. The joint buckled with a wet, popping sound. The third man, who had been circling, froze, his hands halfway up. Ronan shoved the first man into the third, sending them both staggering back. He stood over the one on the ground, who was clutching his ruined knee. "You do not want this box," Ronan said, his voice a calm, deadly promise. "You do not want this street. Go." They went. They scrambled away, dragging their injured friend, disappearing into the shadows. I was shaking, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I was furious. What was that? That was not a janitor. That was not some guy who picks things up. They ran from you, just like Marco, just like the cops. If you are just a janitor, Ronan, why is everyone in this city so afraid of you? He bent down and picked up the heavy alternator box as if it weighed nothing. He turned to me, his face shadowed by the alley, his eyes pinning me against the wet brick. "Because I clean up worse messes than grease," he said. He did not speak again, not in the alley, not on the drive back. He pulled up in front of my house, the rain hammering on the roof of the car. He killed the engine, plunging us into silence. "They will not bother you again," he said. "How do you know that?" "They know who I am now." "And who is that, Ronan?" I demanded, my voice raw. He ignored the question. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, pewter keychain. It was shaped like the Halcyon Point Lighthouse, the one just south of the city. "Take this." I looked at it, confused. "Why?" "It is a panic button. If you are scared, if you are in real trouble, press the light twice." I took it. His fingers brushed mine. They were so warm. "I do not understand any of this." "You do not need to. You just need to be safe." He was looking at me, his gaze intense, not as a janitor, not as a fighter, but as a man. His eyes dropped to my mouth. The air in the car, which had been so cold, was now thick and electric. I could feel the pull, the undeniable gravity of him. He leaned in, slowly, his movement measured, giving me every chance to pull away. I could smell the rain on his skin. I could see the flecks of gray in his dark eyes. My heart was doing that stupid, stuttering dance again. My lips parted. I wanted him to kiss me. I wanted him to erase the fear, the fines, the FBMI, the alley, all of it. And that was exactly why I had to stop him. Just before his lips touched mine, I put my hand on his chest. It was like pressing against solid rock. "No." He stopped, his mouth millimeters from mine. He did not pull back. He just waited, his breath warm on my skin. "I cannot," I whispered, and I hated how my voice shook. "I am in so deep. I am drowning. My family is falling apart. I cannot be—" I looked him right in the eye, forcing myself to be brave. "Do not make me another one of your messes, Ronan." His expression tightened, the mask of the janitor, the hardness of the fighter. It all settled back into place, erasing the man who had danced with me. He gave one sharp, formal nod. He understood. I grabbed the door handle and got out of the car. He did not drive away immediately. He waited, watching, until I had my key in the lock and the front door was open. I leaned my back against the solid wood, listening to the sound of his engine disappear down the street. My lips were trembling. My heart felt like it had skipped its final beat. I opened my hand. The small metal lighthouse was digging painful ridges into my palm. The Iron Veil warehousing badge felt like a stolen police revolver in my pocket. It was 2 a.m. The diner was closed, and I was standing across the street from the most secure, off-limits building on the Ashbourne Wharf. Iron Veil was a massive, windowless block of corrugated steel and concrete, a fortress disguised as a storage facility, the Vesper Syndicate's bank. My father's face, pale and defeated in the tow yard, flashed in my mind, the harbor compliance office, the fake fines, the photograph of him talking to Marco. Don't react with fear. I pulled my hoodie low and walked across the rain-slicked street. I didn't wait for my courage to fail. I walked straight to the employee entrance, a heavy steel door next to the massive bay opening. The keypad glowed a soft, menacing green. I held the technician's card up to the scanner. There was a half-second pause. My heart stopped. A loud thunk echoed in the silence, and the green light flashed. The magnetic lock had disengaged. I pushed the door open, slipped inside, and eased it shut. The air inside was cold, silent, and smelled of ozone and dust. I was in a narrow corridor lit by emergency exit signs. I followed it, my sneakers squeaking on the polished concrete, until it opened into the warehouse proper. It was vast, a cathedral of shadows filled with towering shelves of sealed crates. I was looking for an office, a file room, somewhere the Sable crew's dirty business would be logged. I found it at the far end, a raised glass box looking out over the floor. I took the metal stairs, tried the door locked. I used the card again. Thunk. I was in. The office was dark. Monitors sleeping. I found a desk lamp, clicked it on, and its narrow yellow beam illuminated rows of file cabinets. I pulled one open. Invoices, shipping manifests, customs declarations. It was all legitimate. I pulled open another. Looking for this. I froze. The main office lights snapped on, blinding me. 2 men were sitting in the corner as if they had been waiting for me. They were not Sable thugs. They were clean-cut, wearing dark peacoats, and had the dead, patient eyes of professionals. A 3rd man stood by the door, blocking my only exit. Who? I stammered, my hand flying to my pocket. She does not have it. The man by the door said. He had a faint Eastern European accent. She's just a stray. A stray with a Vesper technician's card, said the man in the chair. He stood up. He was tall, thin, and looked more like an accountant than a gangster. That is a very rare key. Little girl, where did you get it? I found it. He smiled, a thin, dry cutting motion. No, you did not. You work at the Ravenlight. You are the girl who serves the Vesper boss his coffee while he cosplays as a janitor. My blood turned to ice water. I do not know what you are talking about. We are the Glasshound crew, the man said, as if I should know the name. And we are here for the same thing you are, the Crystal Ledger, Vesper's real books, and you are going to tell us where he keeps it. He stepped toward me. The man by the door grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep like steel clamps. I do not know anything, I yelled, trying to twist away. You will, the leader said, pulling a small, thin knife from his pocket. He was not going to kill me. He was going to mark me. Crash! The glass office door exploded inward, shattering into 1,000 pieces. A massive white cloud of CO2 vapor blasted into the room, obscuring everything. Choking vapor blasted into the room, obscuring everything. A fire extinguisher, what the man holding me grunted, his grip loosening in surprise. Through the fog, a dark shape moved. It was Ronan, still in his damn blue baseball cap, still in his cheap janitor's jacket. He moved past the leader, grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall mount, and triggered it directly in the face of the man holding me. The man screamed, a muffled, freezing sound, and let me go. "Lila now," Ronan yelled. He did not run for the stairs. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back of the office, to a small metal door I had not even seen. He kicked it open, and we tumbled out onto a rusty external fire escape. "Go down," he commanded. We hit the alley gravel running. The air was cold, but I was sweating. "Get in," a voice shouted. I looked up. The alley was not empty. 3 massive black SUVs, the kind government agents use, were idling in a perfect silent line. A man in a sharp black suit and driving gloves held the rear door of the first one open. He was looking straight at Ronan. "Boss," the man said, his voice urgent, "we have the perimeter secured. Get in. The Glasshounds have a secondary team." My mind stalled. "Boss." Ronan did not even look at the man. He was scanning the roof line of the warehouse, his body tense. "I am the janitor today," he said, his voice a low, lethal snarl. He shoved the driver. "Get out of here, all of you. You are blowing my cover. Go." The driver looked stunned. "But, boss." "Go." Ronan grabbed my arm again. "They are still inside. We cannot go down. We go up." He shoved me toward the fire escape. "Up, move." We scrambled up the cold, wet rungs, past the office, onto the flat, gravel-covered roof of the warehouse. The rain had stopped, but the wind was sharp, whipping my hair across my face. We ran toward the far edge, where it connected to the lower roof of the adjacent building. "We are trapped," I panted, looking at the dark chasm between the buildings. "No, we are not," Ronan said. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind us. We were cut off. 4 men, the Glasshounds from the office, including the leader, walked out of the roof access doorway. "The janitor, boss," the leader sneered, the thin knife still in his hand. "I should have known, Ronan Vale, the ghost of Vesper. You've been cleaning floors for 6 months. We thought you were dead." Ronan pushed me behind him. He did not raise his hands. He just stood there, his shoulders relaxed. "You are a long way from home, Cale," Ronan said. His voice was calm, conversational. "Your brother is still running the card games in the Lithuanian district. Right, tell him I like the old dealer better." "The leader," Cale flinched, his composure cracking. "How do you—" Ronan's gaze shifted to the man on his right. "And you, Milo, you still owe the house from that night at the marina. Your wife thinks you were working late. You were not." Milo's face went pale. "He is bluffing," a third man snarled, raising a pistol. Ronan looked at him. "Your sister, Anna. She just got accepted to Ashbourne University, full scholarship. From the Vesper Community Fund, you shoot me. That scholarship evaporates, and she goes home." The man's hand started to shake. Ronan was not fighting them. He was dissecting them. He knew their names, their families, their debts, their secrets. This was not a fight. It was an execution of a different kind. I was terrified, but a cold, clear anger was rising above it. This was the proof. This was what they were doing. My hand fumbled in my pocket for my phone. I pulled it out, my fingers clumsy. "Lila," Ronan said, his voice low, not turning. "Hold it steady. Truth needs a calm lens." I raised the phone. I hit record. The red light glowed. Cale screamed, a raw sound of frustration, and lunged. Ronan did not wait. He grabbed my waist, lifted me off my feet, and launched us off the side of the building. We fell for a second that lasted an eternity before crashing hard onto the lower roof of the next building. We rolled, gravel biting into my palms. A high-pitched zing sounded past my ear, and a bullet chipped the concrete where we had been. Another zing. A window in the rooftop access door next to us shattered. Ronan threw himself on top of me, his body a solid, heavy shield, pushing my face into the tar paper. Shards of glass rained down on his back. "Stay down." He was up in a second, pulling me. "Stairs. Go." We found the service stairs and clattered down them. 4 flights in total darkness, bursting out into a different alley, 2 blocks away from Ironvale. I leaned against the wall, gasping, my legs feeling like water. The alley was silent. The black SUVs were gone, as if they had never existed. Ronan leaned against the opposite wall, breathing hard. He was still just the janitor, in his cheap, torn jacket, but the sleeve of his left arm was dark, a wet, spreading stain. "You are hit," I whispered. "Glass," he said, his voice strained. "It is nothing." "It is not nothing." I ripped a long, clean strip from the hem of my white apron, ignoring his protests. "Give me your arm." He hesitated, then held his arm out. I wrapped the cloth tightly around his forearm, my fingers brushing his skin. He was warm. Despite the cold, he winced, a sharp intake of breath, but he did not pull away. He just watched me, his gaze unreadable, as I tied the knot. He drove me home in that same silent, immaculate sedan. He had retrieved it from somewhere. He walked me to the door. "Ronan," I said, my voice shaking from adrenaline and anger, "you need to go to a doctor." "I am fine." He turned to go. "Stop." I grabbed his good arm. He froze. He turned back, and he looked at my face, his eyes dark and stormy, focused on my neck where the glasshound's fingers had dug in. I had forgotten about it, but I could feel the throbbing ache now. His gaze hardened, the air around him dropping 10 degrees. "Did he—" "Do not." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Do not ask about me. You do not get to— You lied to me." "I did not lie. Lila, I never said I was only a janitor." "A janitor?" I laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "They called you boss. They called you Ronan Vale. They said you were the ghost of Vesper. You have a private army in black SUVs. You knew those men on the roof. You knew their families." I poked him in the chest, my finger hitting the solid muscle. "Who are you?" He looked down at my hand, then back up at my face. The streetlight cast long shadows across his jaw. He was a stranger, a dangerous, powerful stranger who had danced with me in the diner. He stepped back, gently removing my hand from his chest. He looked at his arm, at the bloody apron scrap I had tied around it. He turned, walked back to his car, and opened the trunk. He pulled out a mop and a yellow bucket. I stared, confused. "What are you doing?" He walked past me, heading toward the Ravenlight Diner, 2 blocks down. "Ronan," I shouted, following him. "Answer me!" He stopped on the sidewalk, his back to me. "The diner floor is dirty," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "The janitor's work is done for tonight." I watched him walk away, the mop resting on his shoulder, a king in a pauper's clothes. I was furious, I was terrified, and God help me, I was grateful. I touched the bruise on my neck. I felt the cold plastic of the Iron Veil card in my pocket and the digital weight of the video on my phone. If he would not tell me who Ronan Vale was, I would find out myself. My brain works in pictures. It's the artist in me. The part that sketched portraits on the boardwalk for spare change before the Ravenlight after the night at Iron Veil. I couldn't sleep. I could only draw. I sat not in my kitchen, but in the quiet, dusty stacks of the Ashbourne Port Library. I wasn't just sketching, I was mapping. My memory of the docks was perfect. I drew the shipping lanes, the crane numbers, the silent, refrigerated containers from Pier 4 that never seemed to run their cooling units. I sketched the route from Pier 4 to the Iron Veil warehouse. Then I drew the outgoing path. The containers were loaded onto supply barges, which motored out 3 miles, just into international water, where they docked with the Elysium, a floating casino ship that never came to port. I drew the flow of cash, dirty money from the unions and the extortion rackets, bundled at Iron Veil, loaded onto the Elysium as cargo, and washed clean in the high-stakes card rooms. It returned to Ashbourne as gambling profits, which were then funneled directly into legitimate-looking investments. I was staring at a diagram of a massive, city-wide laundry service. "You have a talent for architecture, Lila." I jumped, slamming the sketchbook shut. Special Agent Mara Dax was standing over my table, her charcoal blazer immaculate, her dark eyes missing nothing. She hadn't made a sound. How did you find me? You're a creature of habit, the Raven Light, your father's yard, and the library. You checked out a book on maritime law 2 weeks ago. You're predictable. She sat down, uninvited. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you, Agent. I think you do. She slid a file across the table. I didn't open it. That's the compliance report on Carver and Son Towing. $6,000 in fines, another $10,000 in impound fees and recertification costs. We ran the numbers. Your father has 3 days before the bank forecloses on the yard and the house. My stomach tightened. That's extortion. Yes, it is, Dax said, her voice crisp. And the Harbor Compliance Office is a shell corporation owned by the Vesper Syndicate, who, in turn, are funded by the office of Mayor Alder Quinn. She leaned in, her voice dropping. You're in the middle of a war. Lila, I know you were at Ironvale. I know you were with Ronan Vale. I know he's the Vesper ghost. The old boss's son returned to claim his throne. He's just replacing one tyrant with another. What do you want? I want you. You're the only person who's seen him in action and lived. You're the only one he seems to trust. The pitch. Be my witness. Testify to what you saw. Give me Vale, and I will make this all go away. She tapped the file. The fines, the liens, the impound stickers, gone, wiped clean. The FBMI will personally guarantee your father's business. You just have to help me do this the right way. She wanted me to be her bait, to trade one monster for another. I have to go, I said, grabbing my sketchbook and standing up. He's using you, Lila, Dax called after me. When he's done cleaning house, he'll clean up his loose ends, and you're the loosest end he has. I pushed through the heavy oak doors, my heart hammering. I stood on the library steps, the cold wind whipping my hair. I was being squeezed from both sides, the law and the criminal, and I was starting to suspect they were just two arms of the same body. Someone trying to clean house. Dax's words echoed Ronan's. I needed to know. I pulled the small pewter lighthouse keychain from my pocket. My hand was shaking. This was the test. I pressed the small button twice. Click, click. I waited, feeling like a fool. 1 minute, the street was empty, save for a single stray dog. 2 minutes, a bus rumbled past, spewing diesel fumes. 3 minutes, nothing. I was about to turn, defeated, when the black sedan slid to the curb in front of me. It was as silent as a shark. The passenger door opened. Ronan? He was not in the janitor's uniform. He wore a dark wool coat that fit his shoulders perfectly. He looked like the man who had been called Boss. He got out of the car, his eyes not on me, but on the rooftops across the street, on the alley to his left, on the reflection in the library windows. He was scanning, an instinct as natural to him as breathing. He had been there in under 5 minutes. You signaled, he said. It wasn't a question. You are not in danger. Get inside, I said, turning and walking back into the library. I didn't stop at the main floor. I led him down the creaking stairs to the archives, a cold, damp basement room that smelled of mildew and decaying paper. A single bulb cast a weak, yellow light. She found me, I said, my voice echoing off the concrete. Mara Dax. I know, he said, standing right behind me. I hadn't heard him follow. She's been tracking the diner for a month. Her car is parked 2 blocks north. She thinks I'm your associate. She offered to clear my dad's debt if I testify against you. Take the deal, he said, his voice flat. I spun on him. What? Take the deal. Lila, let her put you and your father in protection. Disappear. I'll have money sent. You can start over. No. My voice was sharp, cutting through the dusty air. I'm not running. Not from them. Not from you. I threw my sketchbook onto a table, flipping it open to the money map. This is their operation. The laundry. The Elysium. Then I pulled out my phone and played the video from the Ironvale roof. His voice. Cale's voice. The names. The threats. He watched the video, his expression impassive. He studied my sketches, his gaze sharp and analytical. You did this. I'm not just a waitress. I'm not just bait, and I am not running. I met his gaze. my fury holding me steady. "You told me not to react with fear." "Well, I'm not. I'm angry. This is my home. You don't get to tell me to leave it." He stared at me for a long, heavy silence. The janitor was gone. This was Ronan Vale, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Respect. "All right," he said, giving a single, dangerous nod. "If you won't run, we make them run." He walked past me, his coat brushing my arm. "The glasshounds, Kale, they don't just want the ledger, they want the Venin Fund. That's the real prize." The mayor's charity. His personal bank. It's the shell corporation that receives all the clean money from the Elysium. Kale wants it to blackmail Quinn. Dax wants it to burn the city down. We're going to use it to cut the head off the snake. Help. Dax wants a witness. We'll give her one. You. He walked to the archive room's single, fogged-up window. He raised a hand and drew a line in the condensation on the cold glass. "Quinn," he said, his voice a low rumble. He drew a line down. "The Venin Fund, and lines spiderwebbing out. Sable, Harbor Compliance, the Glasshounds, Kale, all feeding it." He drew another circle, separate from the rest. Us. "We give them the crystal ledger," I said, the plan forming in my head. "The bait." "We make them think we are," he corrected. "You will call Dax. You will tell her you have Vale's ledger, and you will only trade it for your father's immunity, in a public place, where everyone can see." He drew a new line, connecting us to the fund. "And the exchange point, he said, "it has to be isolated, but visible. Halcyon Point, the old lighthouse." His finger traced the last line on the fogged glass. As he marked the spot, the side of his index finger brushed the bare skin of my wrist. It wasn't a touch. It was a brand, a faint, accidental graze of warmth that shot up my arm and stopped my heart. I inhaled sharply. He froze. He hadn't meant to do it. He slowly turned his head, his eyes leaving the map and finding mine. His gaze was overwhelming. Stripped of all its masks, it was not the boss or the janitor. It was the man who had danced with me, intense, worried, possessive. He said my name, Lila. It was just my name, but the way he said it, a low vibration that was almost a prayer, it undid me. It was a promise and a warning, all in one. He saw my reaction. He saw me swaying, just a fraction, toward him. His mask slammed back down. He visibly recoiled, pulling his hand back as if my skin had burned him. He turned away, clenching his fist, and I saw him bite his lip. He had crossed a line, his own. He cleared his throat. The moment was gone. The boss was back. "Tomorrow night, you call Dax. You set the meet." He grabbed my hand, turned it palm up, and placed the lighthouse keychain back in it, closing my fingers around it. "I will be watching," he said, his voice all business. "The signal is 3 flashes from the lighthouse lamp. 3 exactly. That means I am in position. It is safe. And if it's not, if it is 2 flashes, or 4, or if the light stays dark, you are compromised. You do not wait. You do not look back. You run." I walked into my father's office at the yard the next morning, and my stomach hit the floor. The air was thick with the smell of defeat and cheap cigars. My dad, Gideon, was sitting at his ancient metal desk, his face gray. Standing over him, grinning, was Marco, the Sable Union thug. He wasn't there for a fight. He had a sheaf of papers and a pen. "Lila, honey. Perfect timing," Marco sneered. "You can be a witness. Your dad's just signing the yard over to the union, a foreclosure, all legal and tidy." "No," I said. The word was flat, dead. "It is not a request. Sweetheart, the bank signed off. It is a court order." He tapped the paper. "He signs. We let him walk away. He does not sign. We take it anyway, and we press criminal charges for negligence. His choice." My father's hand, spotted and shaking, reached for the pen. This was it. This was how they won. I moved. I put my hand over his, stopping him. "Do not, Dad." "Lila, there is no choice," he whispered, his eyes broken. "Get out of the way, girl." Marco growled, his hand moving to his belt. That is enough. The voice came from the doorway. It was Ronan. He was not the janitor. He wore the black wool coat. He looked like he owned the ground he stood on, and every piece of ground around it. He was alone. No bodyguards, no crew. He did not need them. Marco's smugness evaporated, replaced by the same fear I had seen at the diner. Vale. This is official union business. It does not concern you. It does now. Ronan walked calmly to the desk and placed his own thin file on top of Marco's. That is a fraudulent claim, based on manufactured fines from a shell company. This, he tapped his file, is a legal, binding offer to buy Carver and Son Towing for twice its current assessed value, effective immediately. Marco laughed, but it was a nervous, high-pitched sound. You are too late. The bank already foreclosed. The bank did not foreclose. The bank sold the debt to a private holding company this morning. Ronan smiled. A cold, thin expression. My holding company. Ronan leaned forward. You have nothing. Your claim is void. He pulled a small, black digital audio recorder from his pocket and set it on the desk. And this is a recording of your meeting 2 nights ago with Mayor Quinn, where you finalized the plan to illegally seize this property using the Harbor Compliance Office. He pressed play. I heard Quinn's voice, cultured and smooth, followed by Marco's gravelly tone, laughing about how easy it would be to crush my dad. Marco looked like he had been shot. You have 2 choices, Ronan said, his voice a quiet, deadly rumble. You sign this document, he slid a single sheet of paper across the desk, which terminates, permanently, all claims, debts, and actions against Gideon Carver, or, I give this recording to the FBMI, and I will enjoy watching them tear you apart. Marco was shaking, his face purple with rage. He knew he was beaten. He snatched the pen, slashed his name across the bottom of the page, and threw it at Ronan. You are a dead man, Vale. Marco spat. The glasshounds will cut you to pieces. You cannot hide in a mop bucket forever. Get out of my city, Ronan said. Marco and his 2 thugs shoved past him and stormed out of the office. My father was staring at Ronan, speechless, his mouth open. Son, I do not understand, Vice. A noise from the yard cut him off. A heavy, throbbing engine. Not a car, an SUV, then another. Ronan moved to the window. His whole body went rigid. Glasshounds, they were waiting. They knew Sable would fail. He did not go for his sedan. He grabbed my arm. We have to move. Now, both of you. I am not leaving my yard, my dad yelled. Ronan grabbed him by the shirt. They will burn it to the ground with you in it. You are not leaving your daughter. He dragged us toward the back door, toward the yard itself. A black SUV, heavy and militaristic, smashed clean through the front gate. 4 men in dark coats piled out, fanning across the gravel, sidearms already drawn. Ronan looked around, desperate. He saw it, big red, my dad's prize, the 30-ton heavy-duty wrecker. The keys were always in the ignition. Get in, Ronan roared. He shoved my dad toward the passenger side and practically threw me into the cab after him. He scrambled behind the wheel, his long legs crowding the dash. The diesel engine roared to life with a sound like thunder. Get down on the floor, he yelled at me. He slammed the truck into gear. A man raised his pistol. Ronan did not drive for the gate. He drove for the storage containers, the massive steel wall we used to separate our yard from the main shipping port. He floored the accelerator. The 30-ton truck hit the corrugated steel wall with the force of a train. Metal screamed, rivets popped, and we burst through into the sprawling, chaotic maze of the Ashbourne container port. He is insane, my dad yelled, clinging to the dashboard. Bullets pinged off the heavy steel boom behind us, sounding like angry hornets. The SUVs were following, but they were cars. We were in a tank. Ronan drove like a man possessed, skidding around corners, shoving containers aside, using the narrow, stacked aisles as a shield. He knew these lanes. He knew them like the back of his hand. He found it a low, dark service tunnel under the main port causeway, slick with algae and smelling of the sea. He drove the wrecker deep inside, into the shadows, and killed the engine. Silence. Just the slow drip, drip, drip of water from the concrete ceiling. In the distance, we could hear the faint sound of the SUVs. Lost. My dad was pale, breathing hard. You know your way around this port. I grew up here, Ronan said. He was watching the tunnel entrance, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. They were going to kill us, I whispered, the adrenaline draining away, leaving me shaking. They were going to kill you. Yes. My dad turned in his seat. You saved my yard. You saved my life. You saved my daughter. Who are you, son? Ronan stared into the darkness. When he spoke, his voice was different. The boss was gone. The janitor was gone. This was someone else, someone raw and tired. My grandfather was Antonio Vesper. He ran the city. He had rules, respect. He was betrayed by his own family. My uncle, he exiled my mother, his own sister, threw her out with nothing because she loved the wrong man. He looked at his hands. She raised me on these docks. She worked herself to death at the cannery, trying to give me a life. I grew up with the violence, the smell of fish guts and diesel. When she died, I took the name. I took back the organization, but I swore I would not be him. I am cutting out the cancer. Quinn, the glasshounds, Sable, they are the disease. He finally looked at us. I am the janitor. I am cleaning the house. The silence in the truck was heavy, filled with his confession. My mother, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She was a nurse. At the old port clinic, she saw the corruption, kickbacks, money laundering, unsafe conditions. She started asking questions. She was going to talk to a reporter. I looked down at my own hands. She loved to sail. She went out one afternoon. They found her boat capsized, near Halcyon Point. They called it an accident. They never found her. Ronan did not speak. He did not offer condolences. He just sat there, the engine ticking as it cooled. Then, slowly, he reached across the cab, across the space between us. He placed his hand on my shoulder. It was not a romantic touch. It was not a gesture of pity. It was solid, heavy. It was a gesture of ballast, of shared weight. It was an anchor, holding me steady in the storm of my own past. And I let it. I let him hold me steady. Just for a second, We drove back to my house in silence. The rain had started again, a cold, heavy drizzle that matched the mood. My dad got out of the truck, then paused. He looked at Ronan. Not as a gangster, but as a man. She's been paddling her own boat for a long time, son, Gideon said, his voice rough. She's stronger than you think. He nodded, a silent thanks, and went inside. The trap was set. I pulled out my phone and called Agent Dax. My voice was surprisingly steady. I told her I had the crystal ledger. I would trade it for my father's complete public immunity, Halcyon Point, tomorrow night. She agreed too quickly. It was a trap. I hung up. She took it. I know. Ronan stepped out of the truck, the cab light illuminating him. It is a trap. Then what do we do? If they try to use you as bait, he said, his voice low, I will change the stage. The rain was plastering his coat to his shoulders. He looked exhausted, the weight of his war settling on him. He shrugged off the heavy, wet wool coat, revealing the dark Henley underneath, damp and clinging to his shoulders. I saw it clearly then, the scar, the one I had only glimpsed, the pale, puckered shape of an anchor hook, dug deep into the muscle of his right shoulder, a brutal, ancient wound. I moved without thinking. I stepped forward into the space between him and the truck door. I raised my hand, my fingers trembling. He saw me coming. He froze. Every muscle in his body went rigid, his breath catching in his chest. He did not move, did not breathe, just watched me with those stormy, haunted eyes. I did not pull back. I gently, so gently, laid my fingertips on the raised, damaged skin. It was still, after all these years, radiating a phantom heat. He closed his eyes. A single, sharp breath hissed out from between his teeth. He did not pull away. He let me touch him. He let me see the part of him that was not the boss, not the janitor, but just the man who had been hurt. The night of the meet, The storm hit. We were at Halcyon Point, but hidden. Watching from a rocky overlook, 100 yards from the lighthouse. The wind was a physical force, howling and trying to tear us from the cliff. We were huddled together under a heavy canvas tarp he had pulled from the truck. A tiny, makeshift shelter. We were pressed close, shoulder to shoulder, thigh to thigh. The only warmth came from each other. I could smell the rain and the sharp, clean scent of the sea on his skin. Our breaths mingled in the tiny, dark space, white puffs of vapor in the cold. I watched the lighthouse, the beam cut through the rain. Flash. My heart pounded. Flash. One more. Flash. 3. The signal. His team was in place. It was safe. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I turned my head. His face was inches from mine, shadowed, intense, his gaze fixed on the lighthouse. "Ronan," I whispered, my voice lost in the wind. He turned his head. His gaze dropped to my mouth. The world shrank to the space under the tarp. There was only the roar of the ocean and the sound of his breathing, rough and close. "This is a bad idea." "Lila," he murmured, his breath a warm cloud on my lips. "I know. I cannot promise you a future. I cannot promise you safety. After tonight, you might hate me." "I know that," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Just tonight. No lies, no janitor, no boss." His eyes held mine. He leaned in, closing the last impossible inch. "No lies," he agreed. The wind ripped the canvas tarp from our hands, a violent tearing sound that was swallowed by the roar of the ocean. The overlook was exposed, slick with spray. We were going to be swept off the cliff. "This way," Ronan yelled, his voice barely cutting through the storm. He grabbed my hand, the shelter. I did not know what he was talking about, but I ran, slipping on the wet rock, his grip the only thing keeping me upright. He led me down a narrow, almost invisible path carved into the cliff face, to a low, solid structure I had never seen before, tucked into an alcove of stone. It was an old lighthouse keeper's storm shelter, built to withstand a hurricane. He shoved the heavy wooden door open and we fell inside, tumbling into the absolute, echoing dark. He slammed the door shut, and the sound of the storm was instantly muffled, reduced to a distant, angry howl. We were left in silence, panting, dripping, and blind. I could smell the damp earth, cold stone, and the faint, lingering scent of him salt water and iron. "Stay here," he commanded. I heard him fumbling, the scrape of a boot on stone, then the click of a latch. A beam of light from a heavy-duty flashlight cut through the black. He used it to find an old oil lamp on a table, and then the fireplace. He worked with the same quiet efficiency as the janitor. He found dry kindling and split logs stacked in a dry box by the hearth, and within minutes, a small, brave fire was crackling to life. The flames threw a weak, flickering light across the tiny, stone-walled room. It was sparse. A small table, 2 chairs, a narrow cot with a folded wool blanket. He hung our soaking coats on pegs by the door, where they dripped slow, steady rhythms onto the stone floor. I was shivering, not just from the cold, but from the realization of where I was and who I was with. The meet with Dax was in 2 hours. This was just a pause, a holding pattern. He finished with the fire and stood, turning to face me. He stood a full arm's length away, a shadow silhouetted against the growing flames. The firelight cast a warm, golden glow on the room, catching the dampness in my hair and highlighting the sharp line of my jaw, the pulse beating in my throat. He just watched me, his gaze intense, the world outside, the FBMI, the glasshounds. It all seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of the crackling fire and the heavy, charged silence between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low, rough murmur, barely louder than the storm. "May I touch you, Lila?" My breath caught. It was not a demand from the boss. It was not a deflection from the janitor. It was a question from Ronan, and he was asking for permission. I could not find my voice. I could only nod, a single, sharp dip of my chin. But a nod did not feel like enough. It did not feel equal. As he took one hesitant step toward me, I met him halfway. I stepped into his space and placed my own hand, flat against his chest, right over his heart. It was hammering, a strong, steady, heavy beat that seemed to echo the rhythm of the waves crashing outside. He was not calm. He was anything but... His gaze locked on mine. He accepted my gesture as the answer it was. He raised his hand, the one with the calloused fingers, and touched my face. His touch was so gentle, I almost leaned into it. He brushed the wet strands of hair back from my temple, his thumb stroking softly along my cheekbone. His fingers slid into my hair, cupping the back of my neck, his hand a warm, solid weight. He held me there, his eyes searching mine, asking again, without words. I held his gaze. I did not flinch, did not look away. I was giving my own clear, silent consent. He leaned in, slowly, closing the last impossible inch. The first touch of his lips was hesitant, a bare, soft pressure, a question. He was warm, and he tasted of the salt from the storm. It was not a kiss of possession or demand. It was a kiss of respect. I answered. I rose on my toes, my free hand gripping the front of his Henley, and I kissed him back. I put all the fear, all the gratitude, all the confusion of the past week into it. The tentativeness between us shattered, the kiss deepened, and all the heat I had felt radiating from him before was now pouring into me. His other hand found my waist, his grip strong and sure, pulling me flush against the solid, warm length of him. He held me tightly, but I knew, instinctively, that if I pushed, if I wanted to stop, he would let me go. I had no intention of stopping. The rain hammered on the small roof, a driving, rhythmic sound that was the only music we had. My heart was racing, trying to keep up. I stumbled backward, my foot hitting the leg of the cot, and we both bumped hard into the small table by the wall. A stack of tin mugs rattled and one clattered to the floor. We sprang apart, startled, and then a sound I had never heard before escaped him. A low, breathless laugh, a sound of pure surprise. I laughed too, a short, nervous puff of air. He smiled against my mouth. It was that rare, genuine smile, the one that changed his entire face, and I felt it before I saw it. The humor faded as quickly as it came, replaced by something heavier, more urgent. My thin sweater was damp and cold against my skin. He tugged at the hem, his hand sliding underneath, his warm, rough palm flat against the skin of my lower back. The contact sent a jolt straight through me. His touch was electric. He kissed my jaw, my throat, his lips hot. The sweater slipped, sliding off my shoulder, and he stopped. He pulled back, only an inch, but the distance felt like a mile. His breathing was ragged. His eyes were dark, searching mine in the firelight. He was checking in. He was asking again, the most important question. I did not trust my voice. I was too full of emotion, too breathless to speak, so I leaned forward, closing that small distance, and pressed my forehead against his. I closed my eyes, a silent, absolute answer. A rough sigh escaped him, a sound of surrender. He lifted me then, easily, as if I weighed nothing, and my legs wrapped around his waist. He did not let our lips part. He took the 2 steps to the narrow cot and lowered us onto it, onto the thick, scratchy wool blanket. The world outside, the storm, the men who were hunting us, it all dissolved. There was only the sound of the rain, the scent of the fire, and the solid, undeniable presence of this man. We were a tangle of limbs, a frantic search for warmth. His skin was hot against mine. His kisses were deep, reverent, tracing a path from my mouth to my jaw to the hollow of my throat. He was not taking anything. He was sharing. He was offering a shelter from the storm, not in the stone cabin, but in himself. It was warm, and it was unnecessary, and it was quiet, and it was everything I had been terrified to want. Later, the storm had passed its peak, softening to a steady, Heavy rain. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a deep red light on the room. We were lying tangled together under the thick wool blanket, my head on his chest, his arm a heavy, comforting weight across my waist. He was tracing idle patterns on my bare shoulder with one finger. "When I was a kid," he said, his voice a low rumble, seeming to vibrate through me. "I used to sneak out onto the piers during storms. I loved the smell of the wind, that scent of ozone and deep water. It felt clean, like it could wash anything away." I turned, propping my head on my hand to look at him. His face was relaxed in the dim light. The lines of stress and command softened. "I always wanted to leave," I whispered, confessing something I had not admitted to anyone. "I used to dream of opening a little coffee shop, somewhere warm, south, with a big window, looking out at a calm, blue ocean, somewhere nothing bad ever happened." He looked at me, his eyes serious. He took my hand, the one with the chipped nail polish and the faint smell of diner bleach. He lifted it to his lips and pressed a slow, warm kiss to the back of my knuckles, his gaze never leaving mine. "Let me clean up the garbage here. Lila," he whispered against my skin, "you just focus on making the coffee." A wave of warmth, deeper than the fire, spread through me. He was not offering me escape. He was offering me my home. I settled back down, my head fitting perfectly into the hollow of his shoulder. He held me, his arms a secure fortress, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely safe. We fell asleep like that, our hands clasped together between us as the last of the firelight died. When I woke, I was alone. The cabin was gray and cold. The fire was nothing but black ash. For one heart-stopping second, I thought I had dreamed it all. But the thick wool blanket was still wrapped tightly around me, and it smelled of him salt water and smoke. My coat was gone from the peg by the door. On the small, rickety table, I saw it, a piece of paper, torn from a notepad. It was weighted down by the Vesper silver coin. I scrambled off the cot, pulling the blanket around me. I grabbed the note. His handwriting was not what I expected. It was not the scrawl of a janitor or the elegant loop of a boss. It was sharp, precise, all capital letters, like an architect's blueprint. "Tonight, the meat is still on. 3 flashes. If the signal is different, do not come. Run." The air at Halcyon Point was thick with salt and deceit. I was hidden, crouched behind the same rocky outcropping from the night before, watching the lighthouse. The storm had passed, leaving behind a cold, unnerving stillness. My phone, the link to Agent Dax, felt like a brick of ice in my hand. I was waiting for the signal. 3 flashes, safe. The beam cut through the darkness. Flash. I held my breath. Flash. 1 more. Flash. My heart surged with relief. Flash. A 4th. I froze. My blood turned to ice water. 4 flashes. Ronan's voice in my head, sharp and clear. "If the signal is different, do not come. Run." It was a trap. "Heads up, Carver, we're moving." Agent Mara Dax stepped out from the shadows right behind me. She was not alone. 3 men, all in black tactical gear, fanned out, their weapons held low. "The signal," I stammered, my voice sounding thin and stupid. "It was wrong. It was 4 flashes." Dax gave me an impatient look. "It's a last-minute change. My team is running the light. We're running point. We have eyes on the prize. Now, where is it?" She was lying. The confidence was too forced. The men with her felt wrong. They were too still. Their eyes too dead. They were not cops. "No," I said, backing away. My hand was already in my pocket, my fingers wrapped around the pewter lighthouse keychain. "Do not be stupid, Lila," Dax snapped. "This is the deal. Your father's freedom." "No," I said again, louder. I had to change the stage. I had to move the trap. I cannot do it here. It is too dark. I heard something. A car. On the access road. I think it is the Glasshounds. I think they followed me." Dax cursed, looking back toward the road. She believed me. "I will not do it here," I insisted, letting my voice shake. I will meet you, but somewhere lit, somewhere public. Pier 17, the old loading dock, it has public cameras. I will be safe there." Dax stared at me, her eyes drilling into mine. I could see the calculation. She was frustrated, angry, but she could not risk losing me. The bait. "Fine," she spat. "Pier 17, in 30 minutes, and you come alone." She and her team melted back into the shadows. I did not run. I waited until I heard their car start. Then I walked, forcing myself to be calm, to the main road. I did not go to Pier 17, not yet. I went to the service entrance of Pier 15 a block away, and I waited. Pier 17 was a massive concrete slab jutting out into the harbor, lit by the harsh, orange glare of sodium vapor lamps. It was designed for loading container ships, not for secret meetings. I saw Dax's black van parked at the far end. And then I saw the other cars, 2 black SUVs, the same ones from Ironvale, slid out of the darkness and parked, blocking the only exit. This was not Dax's backup. Cale, the glasshound leader from the roof, got out, but he was not in charge. He walked to the rear door of the lead SUV and opened it. The man who stepped out was immaculate. He wore a tailored cashmere coat and a politician's smile. I recognized him instantly from the newspapers. Silas Cade, Mayor Alder Quinn's chief of staff, the true power, the man who signed the checks. Dax, seeing this, stepped out of her van, her hand on her sidearm. "Cade, what the hell is this? This is an FBI operation." Silas Cade just smiled. "Agent Dax, you are relieved. Thank you for bringing our lost lamb home." The 3 tactical men who had been with Dax at the lighthouse now turned, leveling their weapons at her. She was betrayed, a pawn, just like me. "Now, Lila," Silas said, his voice smooth and friendly, "I believe you have something for me. The ledger, and the video you took at Ironvale." "I do not know what you are talking about," I said, my voice shaking. "Do not play games, child," Silas sighed, bored. He snapped his fingers. Cale opened the side door of the SUV. They dragged him out. "Dad." My father, Gideon, his face bruised and terrified, a gag stuffed in his mouth, his hands bound. They threw him onto the concrete at Silas Cade's feet. "This is very simple," one Cade said, adjusting his cuff. "You are going to give me the ledger and the recording, then you are going to call your ghost, Ronan Vale, and you are going to bring him here. If you do, your father lives. If you refuse—" He nudged my dad's ribs with his expensive leather shoe. "He will have a very unfortunate, very deep swimming accident." My entire world compressed into that single, horrifying image. My father, helpless on the pier. My hand was in my jacket pocket, gripping the small lighthouse. I did not hesitate. I pressed the button. The hidden distress signal, sending my coordinates over the private channel Ronan had set up. Then I remembered the cameras, the cold, unblinking eyes of the Port Authority, recording everything. I had to use them. I took a deep breath and I shouted, my voice carrying on the cold, salty air. "Silas Cade, is this how Mayor Quinn runs the city? My name is Lila Carver. You kidnapped my father, Gideon Carver. You are on Pier 17, and you are trying to extort me." Cade's smile vanished. "Shut her up." One of the glasshounds lunged for me, but it was too late. "That will not be necessary." The voice came from the darkness, from the maze of shipping containers. Ronan. He walked into the harsh orange light. He was alone. His hands were empty, held wide, away from his body. He wore the black wool coat, his face a mask of absolute calm. "You want me, Silas, not her," Ronan said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Let her and her father go. I am the one you want." Silas Cade's smile returned, triumphant. "Ronan Vale, the prodigal son, the janitor. How perfect. You would trade yourself for a waitress." "I am right here," Ronan said. He took 2 more steps into the light. "Get him," Cade ordered. The glasshound started to move. "The stage is a little bright for my taste." "Silas," Ronan said. He was standing next to a massive steel electrical junction box that powered the entire pier. He grabbed a loose piece of scaffolding pipe from the ground. "Let us change the lighting." He swung the heavy steel pipe, smashing it into the junction box. The explosion was deafening. A shower of blue and white sparks lit up the pier like daylight, and then every single light went out. We were plunged into absolute, terrifying darkness. "FBMI, do not move." The shout came from everywhere. The chaos was immediate. Black vans, the real FBMI, swarmed the pier entrance, their high beams cutting through the dark, creating a strobe-lit nightmare. Agent Dax had been played, but she had brought her real team. Gunfire erupted. "Insider," Dax screamed, as one of her own agents turned and fired at her. The pier exploded. It was a three-way war. The Glasshounds, the rogue feds working for Silas, and Dax's loyal FBMI team. Men were shouting, guns flashing in the darkness. In the chaos, I had one target: Dad. I scrambled on my hands and knees, found a crowbar from a dockworker's kit, and smashed the lock on the chain-link holding pen where Cale had shoved my father. "Lila, go!" my dad yelled, grabbing my arm. Across the pier, I saw him, Ronan. He was not shooting. He was fighting Silas Cade, a silent, brutal dance in the strobing headlights. Ronan threw Silas into a stack of empty pallets. He saw me. His eyes met mine, a flash of white in the dark. "Go run." I shook my head. I was not leaving him. Pop hiss, pop hiss. Smoke grenades. The pier was now filled with thick, choking smoke, obscuring everything. "Dad!" "Stay down," I yelled. I would not run. I would fight. I pulled out my phone. I fumbled with the screen, my fingers numb. I opened my live streaming app and hit go. "My name is Lila Carver," I screamed into the smoke, my voice cracking. "I am on Pier 17, Silas Cade. Mayor Quinn's chief of staff is here. He kidnapped my father, Gideon Carver. He is trying to kill Ronan Vale. The Glasshounds are here. They are fighting the FBMI. Someone send the real police." I saw Silas, his silhouette in the smoke, his face twisted in panic. He heard me. The media. The POU. His plan was ruined. He raised his pistol, firing blind into the smoke toward my voice. "No," Ronan yelled. A black shape tackled Silas from the side. The gun went off again. A muffled crack. Ronan cried out. It was not a yell. It was a sharp, punched-out grunt of pain. He stumbled and fell. "Lila!" "Ronan?" I did not think. I abandoned my father, my phone, my safety. I ran into the thickest part of the smoke, toward the sound of his voice. I found him on the ground, clutching his side. "I am hit!" he hissed, his voice strained. "It is a graze. I can move." I heard Silas shouting for his men. The sirens, the real ones, were getting closer. Ronan grabbed my hand, his grip like steel. "This way, the tunnel, the real Halcyon." He did not lead me to the street. He dragged me to the edge of the pier, to a heavy cast-iron grate I had never noticed. He used the crowbar I was still holding and ripped it open. Below us was darkness, a rushing sound, the sea. "The old technical sewers," he panted. "They empty at the lighthouse." He pulled me in. We dropped into the black, into the shockingly cold seawater, leaving the gunfire, the smoke, and the sirens behind us, swallowed by the roar of the underground tide. We came up for air in hell. The technical sewer spat us out into the churning black water at the base of Halcyon Point, but the world was not dark. It was exploding. The sky was saturated with color reds, greens, golds bursting and scattering in stunning, sequential booms. The entire Ashbourne Wharf was alive. It was the Harbor Light Festival. I had forgotten. Of course, they had planned this for tonight. Thousands of people packed the waterfront, their faces turned to the sky, a sea of families and tourists, all cheering, all oblivious, music loud and celebratory, blared from speakers mounted on every light pole. We were soaking wet, freezing, me in my ruined clothes. Ronan clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. We were ghosts at our own city's party. "Lila!" He was panting. The adrenaline wearing off, the pain setting in, the ledger, we have to move. They will lock the port down. He pointed, not to the shore, but to a small, dark motorboat, a civilian pleasure craft, moored about 30 yards off the main pier, bobbing in the waves, away from the official patrol boats, the bait boat. We did not speak. We slipped back into the icy water. The fireworks were so loud they vibrated in my chest, a concussion that matched my heartbeat. The swim was agony. My limbs were numb, my clothes a lead weight. Ronan moved beside me, a silent, dark shape, his strokes strained but powerful. We reached the boat, pulling ourselves over the side, collapsing onto the wet deck. He was bleeding more heavily now, the seawater thinning the dark stain on his shirt. "Ronan, you are—" "I am fine." He moved to a small, locked storage compartment under the dash, produced a key, and opened it. The crystal ledger was not a book. It was a single, waterproof, military-grade hard drive. He held it for a second, then tucked it inside his coat. We could not stay. We slipped back under the pier, climbing a rusty maintenance ladder into the forest of massive concrete pylons. We were in the shadows, directly beneath the cheering crowd. I could see the main stage, set up at the end of Pier 17, the place I had just fled. It was lit like a television studio. And on the massive projection screen, the Jumbotron, I saw his face, Mayor Alder Quinn, smiling, paternal, his hands spread wide. A new era for Ashbourne, he boomed, his voice echoing over the speakers. Moments after his men had tried to kill me, an era of prosperity, free from the shadows of the past. "Silas," Ronan whispered, his voice tight with pain. He pointed. Silas Cade was there, standing just off stage, by the main production tent. He was not watching the mayor. He was scanning the crowd, his phone to his ear, his face a mask of cold fury. He was directing the search. And I saw her, Agent Mara Dax. She was on the other side of the pier, with 4 men in identical FBMI windbreakers. Her real team. She was not looking at the stage. Either. She was watching Silas. She knew. She'd been betrayed. And now she was hunting the man who had burned her. The field was set. A shadow detached itself from the crowd near our pylon. Cale, the glasshound leader, his face bruised from Ronan's earlier beating, his eyes burning with hate. He had found us. "Vale," he hissed, his voice low, not wanting to draw the crowd. "I knew you would come back to the water. I want what you took from me. The roof. Now. Just you. Or I will grab the nearest child and start cutting." Ronan tensed. He believed him. "I have to go," Ronan said to me. "No." I grabbed his arm. "I am not letting you go alone." "Lila, this is—" "You taught me to use a calm lens. Ronan." I pulled the pewter lighthouse keychain from my pocket. It was heavier than I thought. I twisted the top. The small light popped off, revealing a tiny pinhole lens. I pressed a second. Hidden button. A faint, high-pitched whir sounded, and the keychain split apart. The lens, mounted on 4 tiny, foldable rotors, was a miniature drone, the size of a large dragonfly. It hovered in my palm, its blue indicator light steady. "He's on the roof of the harbormaster's office," Ronan said, his eyes on the drone. "It is the only high ground with a clear view." "Go," I whispered. "I will be your eyes. I will be your witness." He scaled the pylon's maintenance ladder, disappearing into the superstructure of the pier, moving toward the harbormaster's building 2 piers down. I stayed in the shadows. I guided the drone. It rose, silent. Mixing with the smoke and embers from the fireworks, I watched the feed on my phone, a perfect, stable, high-definition shot. Ronan was on the roof. Cale was waiting. The fight was not a brawl. It was an execution. Cale was fast, fueled by rage, a long, curved skinning knife in his hand. He feinted, slashing, trying to open Ronan's existing wound. Ronan was wounded, slower. He did not dodge. He grabbed a heavy anchor rope from a roof-mounted winch. Thick and tarred, he used it as a whip, a shield. The heavy, knotted end cracking through the air. Cale lunged, the knife flashing. Ronan caught the blow with the rope, the blade sinking deep into the hemp. He twisted. wrenching the knife from Cale's grip. He kicked Cale in the knee, the same move I had seen him use in the alley. Cale went down. Ronan was on him, the heavy rope in his hands. He wrapped it around Cale's neck, pulled it tight, and braced his foot against the man's back. Cale's face turned a deep, dark purple. His feet kicked uselessly against the tar paper. Ronan was killing him. He was the janitor, cleaning the last, worst mess. This was the cold, hard mafia justice he had been raised in. "Ronan, stop!" I screamed it. My voice was raw, lost in the noise of the festival, but he heard me, or he felt me. On the screen, I saw him freeze. His face, illuminated by a green firework, was a mask of cold, ancient rage. He was the ghost of Vesper, and he was taking back his city. "Ronan," I shouted again, tears of terror and fury streaming down my face. Do not clean it with blood. Do not become him. Do not become your uncle." His gaze on the tiny screen seemed to find the drone. He looked right at me. The rage did not vanish, but it was beaten back, replaced by a terrible, hollow pain. He dropped the rope. Cale collapsed, gasping, choking, but alive. "Fool!" The voice came from below. Silas Cade. He was at the base of the harbor master's office, looking up, his pistol drawn. "If you will not finish it, I will." A flash, a deafening crack, but it was not from his gun. A massive explosion erupted from the base of the main stage, a concussive, blinding white light. It was not a firework, it was a small, controlled charge. Silas had planned this, a diversion. The music stopped. The crowd, in one unified animal motion, screamed, panic, a tidal wave of humanity surging away from the explosion, flooding the piers, the alleys. Ronan was off the roof in a second, half falling, half climbing down a drain pipe. He found me just as the surge of panicked people hit our alley. He did not run. He threw himself over me, pushing me against the brick wall, his body a solid, immovable shield, his arms a steel cage. The crowd smashed against his back. He did not budge. "Trust me, Lila," he whispered, his breath hot in my ear, his body taking the impacts for me. My hands were shaking, but I still held the phone. The drone was still active. On the screen, I saw Silas Cade in the chaos, grabbing Mayor Quinn by the arm. I heard his voice, clear as a bell, over the drone's microphone. "A perfect diversion," Silas said, his face twisted in a triumphant smirk. "The explosion will be blamed on Vale's group. Now we take him in the confusion. My men will handle it. The city owes us. Mayor." I knew what to do. I tapped the screen, activating the secondary protocol Ronan had shown me. I was not just recording, I was broadcasting. On the main stage, the Jumbotron, which had gone dark, flickered to life. It was not the mayor's smiling face. It was my drone feed. It was Silas Cade, in perfect high-definition 30 feet tall, his smirk visible to the entire city. "A perfect diversion," his voice boomed over the emergency speakers, echoing across the wharf. "The city owes us. Mayor." The crowd stopped. They froze. They saw. They heard. A collective, horrified silence fell over the wharf, broken only by the approaching sirens. Agent Dax and her team were the first to react. "FBMI," she bellowed, her gun aimed at the stage. "Silas Cade, you are under arrest." Cale and the Glasshounds were gone, vanishing into the panicked crowd. In the middle of the alley, a little boy, no older than 5, sat on the ground, separated from his parents, his face streaked with tears, screaming in terror. Ronan, ignoring the blood running down his side, ignoring the FBMI, ignoring the chaos, pushed off me. He walked calmly to the boy, scooped him up in his good arm, and held him securely against his chest, murmuring something I could not hear. He walked the boy to the edge of the alley and handed him to the first POU officer he saw. The crowd, the ones who were still watching, saw it. The man on the big screen, the terrorist, the ghost, had just saved a child. But it did not matter. The POU patrol boat, drawn by the explosion, slid its massive black hull against the pier, its spotlight cutting through the smoke. It found us. It found Ronan, standing alone, his hand pressed to his bleeding side. A metallic voice, amplified and unforgiving, boomed from the boat. "Ronan Vale, this is the Ashbourne Public Order Unit. Put your hands in the air. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons." They thought he was the one who set the bomb. He was the perfect scapegoat. I ran to him. I grabbed his hand. It was solid, warm, and covered in his own blood. I would not let them take him. He looked at me. His eyes were not angry. They were not scared. They were full of a terrible, swift calculation. "Lila," he said, his voice urgent. He pressed something cold and metal into my free hand, a heavy ring of old brass keys. "If I do not make it out of this," he said, his voice low and fast, "if you need to disappear, go to the lighthouse, the main electrical cabinet, the one I drew on the map." He did not wait for the police. He pulled me, hard. Running toward the lighthouse, away from the police, away from the crowd, we ducked behind the heavy stone base of the tower. "Ronan, what are you doing?" "Changing the stage, one last time." Sirens shouting, the roar of the sea. He found the low, steel utility door, the one I'd never seen, and used one of the keys. He shoved me inside, into the pitch-black spiral staircase of the lighthouse, and pulled the heavy door shut, sealing us in. The world outside, the sirens, the accusations, was silenced by a single, definitive thud of steel on stone. 3 months, 90 days. That is how long it takes for a city to heal, or at least to scab over. The Ravenlight Diner was gone, shuttered, a monument to the city's greasy past. I did not miss it. My new cafe, the Tide and Ember, sat on the newly renovated promenade, overlooking the water. It smelled of dark roast coffee, cardamom, and lemon pound cake. The sunlight streamed through the clean, floor-to-ceiling windows. It was the cafe I had always dreamed of, the one with the calm, blue view. My father, Gideon, was in his element, running the tow yard. Carver and Son Towing was, according to the Ashbourne Gazette, a model of local integrity. The yard was busier than ever, handling all the new, legitimate Port Authority contracts. Ashbourne was quiet. The news, playing on the small television I kept mounted in the corner of the cafe, told the story. Mayor Alder Quinn and his chief of staff, Silas Cade, had been indicted by the Federal Bureau of Maritime Integrity. The evidence was overwhelming. An anonymous source, the news anchor said, had provided the FBMI with a digital ledger detailing a decade of money laundering, extortion, and corruption, along with a damning video recording from Pier 17. The Vesper Syndicate was broken. The glasshounds were scattered. The reign of shadows was over. It was 3 p.m, the quiet hour before the evening rush. I was wiping down the espresso machine when I saw him. He was on my patio, sweeping. He wore the same cheap nylon jacket, the same blue baseball cap pulled low. He moved with the same quiet, devastating efficiency, collecting stray napkins and leaves. He was a ghost in the bright afternoon sun. He finished the patio, picked up his dustpan, and walked in. He nodded at me, a bare incline of his head, and headed for the stockroom. "We just got a new shipment of filters. Ronan," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "I will check the inventory," he replied, his voice a low rumble. A woman sitting at the corner table, the one with the best view of the harbor, lowered her newspaper. Agent Mara Dax. She wore a casual turtleneck, not a blazer, but her eyes were just as sharp. "His witness protection agreement is still valid, Lila," she said, taking a sip of her black coffee, "so long as he keeps his word." Ronan paused by her table. "Agent." "Vale," she nodded. "Faking your death at the Harbor Light Festival was a mess. The POU spent a week dragging the bay for your body." "It worked," Ronan said. "It did." Dax permitted herself a small, thin smile. "When the old Vesper Guard thought you were eliminated, they all scrambled to fill the power vacuum. They crawled out of the shadows, right into my net. We rolled up the entire organization in 48 hours. You got your convictions," he said. "And you got your city," she countered. "Just remember the terms. Vale. You are a civilian. You are a janitor. You are not the boss." "Understood," he said, and continued to the back room. Dax turned back to me. "He's a good janitor. The floors have never been cleaner." She put a $5 bill on the table and left. Ronan emerged a few minutes later, the baseball cap gone. He had a smudge of dust on his jaw. "She likes you," I said, wiping down a mug. "She likes results." He came behind the counter, standing in my space, close enough for me to smell the faint, clean scent of the sea that always clung to him. "I never gave you these." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the heavy brass ring of keys. "The keys to the lighthouse." "The night of the festival," I said. "You told me to go to the electrical cabinet." "I went back for you after I testified to Dax," he said. "After I gave her the ledger and the recording." He held my gaze. "I needed you to see what you had done, what you had earned." "What we earned, Ronan." He nodded, accepting the correction. "Come on, I will show you." The lighthouse was locked, a historical landmark now, but his key still worked. We went inside, the smell of cold stone and old machinery wrapping around us. He did not lead me up the spiral stairs. He led me to the main electrical cabinet he had drawn on the fogged window in the library. He unlocked it. Behind the panel of dead switches was not a bundle of wires, but a small, dry, steel safe. He opened it. Inside was not gold or cash. It was a single, thick, leather-bound portfolio. "The Vesper Syndicate is dead," he said, placing the portfolio on the dusty floor. "This is Vesper Security and Salvage, Deep Sea Retrieval, Maritime Security, Port Logistics. We went over the books with the FBMI. It is 100% legitimate, funded by the assets I seized back from my uncle." He opened the cover. The signature page was on top. It needed a majority owner, someone the city trusts, someone who is not me. I read the line, primary shareholder, CEO Leela Carver, 51%. I stared at it, my heart hammering. 51%, Ronan, this is everything. "It is collateral," he said, his voice fierce. "It is power, so that no one, not the city, not the banks, not anyone, can ever try to choke you out with a piece of paper again. It is your armor." I looked at him, the man who had pretended to be nothing, who had given me everything. "I am not denying I am a janitor, Lila," he said, reading the look in my eyes. "If your espresso machine breaks, I will fix it. If a supplier gives you trouble, I will clean it up." He stepped closer. "But my name is Ronan Vale, and I am standing right here, in the daylight, and I am not hiding anymore." That night, long after the last customer had left, the cafe was quiet. The tide and ember was warm, the kitchen smelling of the lemons I had been zesting for the next day's cakes. Ronan was at the deep utility sink, his sleeves rolled up, his strong forearms deep in the soapy water. He was washing the last of the barista equipment. I walked up behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist, and pressed my cheek against the solid, warm muscle of his back. He froze, his hands still in the water. "Lila?" he breathed. "You smell like lemons," I whispered. "I like it better than grease." He turned in my arms, drying his hands on a towel. He was still the janitor, in his simple dark Henley. He was still the boss, his eyes holding a power that could command a room. He was just Ronan. He cupped my face, his thumbs gentle on my cheekbones. "You are safe," he said. It was a promise, fulfilled. "We are safe," I corrected. I stood on my toes and touched my forehead to his. He closed his eyes, his breath a warm sigh against my lips. The kiss was not the desperate, storm-fueled embrace from the cabin. It was slow. It was mature. It was a decision. It was the taste of coffee and lemons, a promise of shared mornings, of quiet, normal nights. It was deep and respectful, and it was everything. I buried my hands in his hair, and he held me like I was the only solid thing in the world. His hands splayed on my back, holding me close. We talked, our voices low, whispering about suppliers, about whether to add a new pastry, about the color of the sunrise over the water. He pulled back, his eyes serious in the warm kitchen light. "I do not have a ring," he said, his voice rough. He knelt, not as a boss, not as a janitor, as a man. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was not a diamond. It was not gold. It was a small, polished brass washer. I recognized it instantly. "The silver Vesper coin," I whispered. "I broke it," he said, his voice thick. "I stamped the V out of the middle. The silver is gone. This was the core, the brass, the part that actually held it together. It is just a washer, something a janitor would use." He held it out to me in his open palm. "I'm asking for permission to stay. Lila, to be here, to clean the floors and wipe the counters and fix the lights every day. I am asking to be your janitor." Tears streamed down my face, but I was smiling. Outside, a POU truck, its blue and red lights silent, cruised down the promenade. It slowed as it passed the cafe, the officers inside looking at the two figures in the kitchen, at the man kneeling on the floor. Then it accelerated and kept on driving. Ashbourne knew the name Ronan Vale, but it also knew the debt he had paid. I pulled him to his feet. "I mistook you for a janitor," I whispered, touching the brass washer, still warm in his hand, "and you did not deny it." I looked into his eyes, the storm finally calm. "Not until you had to stand up, in your own name, to protect us." I flipped the sign on the door from open to closed. From the window, I could see the light far across the bay, at the edge of the world, the Halcyon Point Lighthouse. It cut through the darkness. Flash, flash, flash. Safe, home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please share your city or country in the comments below and let us know what you thought of Lila and Ronan's journey. Your feedback means the world to us. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and hit that like button. And if you really want to support the channel, smash the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners. We will see you in the next one.